Good morning. I'm Melissa Southall. Welcome to this edition of Legislative Matters Live with M&M. This is our second episode. Last month, we talked to our legislators at the federal level who explained to us what would be easier for them, how to get a hold of them, whether it be calling them, writing them a personal letter or an email. And so then this month, we are going to be talking to some of our lawmakers at the state level.
Yes.
Vernon Criss, House of Delegates Representative, District 10, will be here talking to us. And also the wonderful Wendy Tuck, who was recently elected for Parkersburg Council Member. I'm sorry, Parkersburg City Council.
And I'm Morgan Spicer, and I'm also the co-host of Legislative Matters Live with M&M. And I'm so glad to be here for another wonderful episode. And we've got a lot of stuff for you today that you're going to really enjoy it. I think, first of all, I want to describe the purpose of the show. And the purpose of this show is to educate you, the self-advocate, about the important issues of legislative matters, because it does truly matter to not only you, but to your People First chapters and the people for the self-advocates and for the people that you advocate for.
That's right, Morgan.
It's also very important that you learn how to write letters effectively to your legislators on a federal and state level. And another session we're doing later is who you're going to call. One of those where you get to find out and helps out with figuring out, I have an issue with a pothole in my state. Who do I get a hold of for that?
That you would get a hold of a city council person like Wendy Tuck.
That was one of our awesome segments that we're going to be doing again this week, but this time with a special guest. So we'll do that more a little bit later. I'm also excited to have, for our Advocacy and Action segment, we're going to have Vicki Wolfe, who's going to talk to us about how she's been using her self-advocacy skills when paying off her mortgage. So she's going to talk to us and hopefully encourage others to keep on fighting the good fight when it comes to self-advocacy, because that fight never ends.
That's right, Morgan. I'm so excited.
I am. It's going to be a great show.
To be able to talk to Vicki.
Yes, yes.
And all the other great people that take the time to come talk with us, like our legislators, our city council people.
Yes. And we just want to remind you too that if you have any self-advocates that are using their advocacy skills to benefit not only themselves, but their lives or the people around them, we would love to have you on the show. And we'll explain later how you can definitely get involved and potentially be on another episode of Legislative Matters Live. We'd love to have you.
That's right, Morgan.
Yeah. So now we're going to turn it over to Liz Ford and Doug Hess for Legislative Matters Explained. Take it away, Liz and Doug.
Good morning. I'm Liz Ford here with Doug Hess to talk about why legislative matters matter. Legislative advocacy is the most direct way for us to cause change in government policy. This includes helping a legislator introduce a bill that could help people with disabilities in West Virginia, or working with legislators to stop a bill that could harm people with disabilities. Doug and I are going to be reading a little bit today, which we'd rather just talk right to you, but we want to make sure that we share accurate information. As we say, always go to the source. So yes, we did some good research. So Doug, why is the legislature important?
Well, Liz, a legislature, now I'm going to use some complicated terms possibly. So if you don't understand, this is a perfect time to take a couple of notes. And then if you're like, well, what did you mean when you said that? That's when you can call Melissa and Morgan and say, hey, when Doug said that, I didn't quite get that. And then explain further. But the official proper description of a legislature is it's a deliberative body, which means they talk, they deliberate. It's an assembly with the authority to make laws for a political entity. such as a country or a city or a county or a state. Legislatures form important parts of most governments in the separation of powers model. That means we don't have a dictator that one person runs the place. The model is separation of powers. They're often contrasted with the executive branch, which would be like the president or the governor, they're the executive, and the judicial branch, those are the judges and things like that. So a little bit of history about the Americans with Disabilities Act is going to be helpful to understand why advocacy is important when it comes to all these legislative things.
And that's so true, Doug. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, was signed into law on July 26, 1990. Its overall purpose is to make American society more accessible to people with disabilities. That's what we're here to help with as well.
Yes.
In 2008, Congress passed the ADA Amendments Act. The Americans with Disabilities Act became law in 1990. The ADA is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, and all public and private places that are open to the general public.
And that is so important, as there are 4 different principles for effective legislative advocacy, whether it's the ADA or other things. So the first one is knowing what you want. You can't just say, you need to fix highways or fix healthcare. You need to know what you want. And then your communications with those officials will be more effective only if you have a specific goal in mind. So you can't just say, fix healthcare. You need to say what part of healthcare and how that specifically works. You also need to know who you're talking to. Your voice has the most power with the elected officials who represent the area you live in, work, or serve, just like with the game show we're going to be doing, who you're going to call. You need to call the right official in the right area. The third part is knowing how to talk to them. And then very important is once you talk to them, knowing how to follow up.
And while getting the results you want might be difficult, making the pitch for the policy change you want to see isn't. In our own ways, we're all advocates for something, whether it's asking for that raise, trying to get into your school or choice, your school of choice, or speaking up on behalf of our children. One way or another, we're all advocates.
And now that you realize just how easy it is to advocate, here are a few things that you need to keep in mind in order to be an effective advocate. You want to be as effective as possible. You don't just want to say, I want this to happen if you're not effective. So first, data and research is critical, as they help make up a concrete case to the public. The media and the policymakers about the problem, and then the effectiveness of that proposed solution. So you can't just say, fix this, fix my pothole. You need to be able to say, okay, 500 people drive down this street every day and cross this pothole. So if you make a policy that such and such will allocate money to fix the pothole, that's more effective than just saying, hey, pave my street. So it's important to be able to come up with that reliable data because for existing problems, it helps to have data to show the impact that those problems have had on you and your community more broadly. In other words, reliable data and facts about the issue can help make the case for changing the policy and are important to influence and convincing the policymakers on the need for that change. That's why when they say, when you tell your story, they don't want to know your life story. They want to know the story that talks about that issue and how it impacts you and everybody else.
Exactly. And effective communications require the right messaging and framing and targeting to the right audience. Effective messaging and framing can build awareness, change public perception, and move people to action. Importantly, these messages should target the individuals you are trying to persuade by considering their motivations. For example, if a lawmaker in your community is an avid supporter of creating a balanced budget, they may not be eager to fund a costly workforce development program. What can you say to this lawmaker that appeals to them, even if they are hesitant to approve legislation that would cost taxpayers more money? Of course, lawmakers are always motivated by the need to represent their constituents. So when we advocate for public policies that improve communities, it's important to emphasize stories from your clients and from all the people with whom we work about the impact our important programs have on their lives. voice. In fact, telling your story is easy and effective and has the potential to engage elected officials and the public on a deeper level.
Educating and engaging the policymakers is important, even when you don't have a specific ask. Because, as an example, at the beginning of the session, the West Virginia session, they had over 650 bills. Well, they can't possibly know about every single piece of legislation. So that's why educating your lawmakers is the most direct opportunity you have to influence policy. It allows you to develop strong relationships and create policy champions who will then advocate for the kinds of changes that benefit the people and communities you serve. You want them calling you as someone that is impacted. So when they're in that committee meeting, they say, I've talked to an individual. Instead of, I have this petition of so many names that I don't really know, they can say, this is about a particular individual. So building strong, diverse, and engaged partnership bases, a base will amplify your impact. You can be an effective advocate on your own, but if members of your networks and coalitions can sound a unified voice, like People First, and we all get together and we all collectively work on things, your chances of success will multiply. That's the old thing, there are power in numbers. So by building those relationships with your partners and identifying the ways in which that partnership can be mutually beneficial, you will be able to bring partners to the table to reinforce the message that you use to influence the policy-making process.
And Doug and I thank you for joining us, and we are so happy to be a part of this wonderful program with Melissa and Morgan, and we really do recognize that legislative matters matter.
Yes, thank you very much. And again, if anything we said was a little, that was a little complex, that's exactly the kind of stuff we'd like you to write or call and tell Melissa and Morgan, hey, could you explain that a little more detail or how I can build those relationships? And then they can work on that in future programs.
And now back to Melissa and Morgan.
Today, we are going to talk to West Virginia 10th House of Delegates Member Vernon Criss. He is on several committees, including Finance and Technology and Infrastructure. Thank you, Delegate Criss, for joining us today.
Thank you for asking.
All right, my first question is what are some ways that you, the House, are working on improving broadband access?
So right now, one of the major pieces of legislation that we've passed that came through the Finance Committee to the floor is an opportunity for the contractors that are going to receive these contracts to build the broadband system in various areas of the state are going to be able to go to their local banks or their local lending institutions that they use in the course of their business and get loan guarantees from the Economic Development Authority so that they can borrow enough money to do the construction, buy the supplies, and place the fiber optic or the wires or however they're going to do it in each of these areas. And this is a big help because though the contracts are coming from the federal government to put the wire up or in the ground, a lot of because of the business issues involved, they may need to borrow capital to do this. And so the Economic Development Authority is going to back these loans so that they can borrow the money locally and put some West Virginia people to work actually doing the construction.
Now, will this fix all of the areas that you mentioned? Because I do know that there are some members of our People First that use dial-up or their broadband is slow. Will this cover all of those areas?
From what I understand and of the maps that the Secretary of Economic Development has that he has showed us, I believe that's true, that every area of the state, and that's one of the reasons that this bidding process took place in Washington for states like West Virginia to have these contracts placed out there for public bidding so these contractors will be able to cover the state. We're hoping that that all is true. There still may be some areas that have dead zones, but I believe that this is supposed to take care of that.
Now, what are some of the resources, if any, that our People First members can look into?
Well, one of the things you can probably do is follow the West Virginia legislature as far as some of these bills are concerned. go to the topics page on the website, put in broadband. You'll see the various bills that have been moving through both the House and the Senate, and you can follow the trail on where they are at. I'm pretty sure that our bill that we dealt with as far as the loan program was concerned is now over in the Senate. I'm sorry, I don't have a particular number, House bill number for you. Since we're dealing with about 3,000 pieces of legislation, I can't keep all the numbers straight. But at least you can follow the bill. We understand just from what the economic development people have told us that the legislation at the federal level has allowed all this to happen. The dollars are to pay for these programs are in place at the federal level. So it's a matter of getting these contractors to get started and start placing wire up and wire in the ground.
Now, is there going to be a timeline on when this is going to be completed? Because I know that several people have asked about when this project is going to be finished. So would you know roughly when that would be accomplished?
I don't know exactly what the time frame is, but I think it's fairly short in construction time. So either 2 construction or 3 construction seasons, I would believe that this could be done.
Thank you very much for answering those questions about broadband there for me. Now, the other issue we have is transportation. Now, a lot of our People First members rely heavily on transportation, whether it be bus, car. Are there any transportation bills in the House that are up for consideration?
All the public transportation funds that we deal with come through the road fund. So the Secretary of Transportation and the Department of Highways and the Department of Motor Vehicles divisions are concerned with all those factors. Any dealing with money has to come through your gasoline tax, your purchasing the 6% privilege tax when you buy an automobile, and the renewal of your driver's license and your car license. All those funds go into quote unquote the road fund, and that road fund funds transportation. As far as public transportation is concerned, as we talked earlier today on, there may be some opportunity at the federal level with the CARES money, some one-time money, to be able to help expand some public transportation issues outside of the actual city limits in the Parkersburg area, Vienna area, to look at Wood County area to expand some of those routes. But as I told the group this morning, I think you need to make a inquiry of the county and also of the Congressman McKinley's office and see if there's an opportunity there for the federal people to get involved, especially on the transport like the Mid-Ohio Valley Transportation Authority.
Okay, now another question I had was a lot of our People First members have issues with transportation getting to our annual meetings that we have, our seminar that we have in Jackson's Mill. What are some steps that they can take to help when it comes to speaking up about transportation? What are some things they could do?
Well, first of all, when it comes to public transportation, the carrot comes from Washington. So writing your congressman, a lot of the 3 congressmen that we have local offices in their districts. In fact, there's for David McKinley, there's one in Morgantown, and one in Parkersburg, and one in Wheeling. You can contact them locally or write a letter or an email to his office in Washington. The same for the other 2 congressmen in our area. You can also contact both Senator Capito and Senator Manchin on these same issues. But the public transportation part of our lives, those monies do come from the feds. And to be able to gather more of those funds, we need to be involved in the reappropriation of the federal highway transit money at that point. As far as what roads are being done, generally there are public hearings on expanded roads or new roads, and the department is required to hold public hearings. I noticed on the news the other day that they were holding a public hearing, but it was a virtual, like your Zoom meeting we're doing today, that you had the opportunity to do. We're doing Zoom or team meetings here on public hearings to reduce the possibility of people getting sick in large groups of gathering together in one place. So it'll be just an opportunity. You'll have to watch, use your website that you may not have web or broadband service to, but you need to use your computer to check the websites for the highway department and see when those public hearings are at.
So you're encouraging our People First members to attend these meetings in these forums?
I think it's real important that you all get involved in those types of things. I come from my background as a part-time legislator that I'm in Charleston 2 months out of the year. The rest of the time is being in Parkersburg in our various family businesses that we have. And so everybody has a different walk of life when it comes to their background. It's important that you understand and that your constituents there understand that if they get involved in some of these public transportation issues or road issues, that it's important that we hear about it too, because again, I'm only as good a legislator as the information that's brought to me. If people that are involved on a part-time basis on these other boards and can come to us and give us the information that they have, it gives us better information to be able to make the decisions that need to be done.
Okay, and then what would be the best way for any People First member that wants to reach out and get a hold of you? What is the best way? Would it be mail, email, phone call? What's the best way for you?
For the Parkersburg area, there you can put up my email address. I think it's vernon.criss@wvhouse.gov. That's my email address, and I have that on my phone so I can check that. My phone number is 304-481-0167. If you want to call me and leave me a text or call me, a lot of times, as Doug has found out while I'm in Charleston, I'm, believe it or not, going from meeting to meeting, and a lot of times I cannot answer the phone, but leave me a text or leave me a message and I'll call you right back as soon as I can. But thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. I really appreciate it. I hope to hear from you all and give me some input, because that's what I need to hear from. And it's been very difficult this year, as you well know, especially when you all have not been able to come down here. But you have to understand, all the people that we rely on for information in the lobbyist groups have not been able to get in the Capitol. So it's made it a difficult session when we don't have research people on staff for us, that we rely upon the lobbyist system to give us the information. And sometimes the information is rather difficult to get because of the time issue. So I'm hoping that we get over this COVID pretty soon so that we can let the people back in the Capitol.
Thank you, Delegate Criss, so much for joining us today. It was an honor to speak with you.
Thank you, Melissa and Morgan, for this opportunity to be here today. I really appreciate it. I hope this helps you all. If not, call me back and we can do this again. Thank you very much.
And thank you.
And now it's time to play Who You Gonna Call, our monthly program where Melissa and Morgan are asked questions to see if they know which branch of government or level of government to call. Whether it's Congress, the state capitol with senators and state House of Delegates members, or city council members. So here we go with Who You Gonna Call for Legislative Matters Live with M&M, Melissa and Morgan. All right, here's your first question, Melissa and Morgan. Who are you going to call? You've been hearing about a bill that would bring more funding for home and community-based services. Would that be A, your city council member, B, your state House of Delegates or state senators, or C, your senator or U.S. Congress members?
See your U.S. Congress.
C.
All right, let's see what it is. Correct, your U.S. senators or U.S. Congress members. And for a little more detail, A draft bill was unveiled earlier this month, in fact, actually last Monday, in Congress, known as the HCBS Access Act, that would require Medicaid to provide home and community-based services, that's what the HCBS stands for in the Act, to everyone who's eligible, and establish a minimum set of services that states must offer. The bill also is designed to help states create a network of providers and workers to deliver such supports. Moving on, who are you going to call? For question 2, when people have a serious medical condition that requires a transplant, such as a liver, heart, or other vital organ, and there is a concern that people with disabilities might be discriminated against and not have the same opportunity to receive a transplant, who are you going to call? Your city council member, your state House of Delegates and state senators, or your U.S. senators or U.S. Congress members? What do you think, Melissa?
Your state House of Delegates.
How about you, Morgan?
The State House of Delegates.
Correct. Your state House of Delegates and state senators. Senate Bill 73 and House Bill 2752 that are going through the legislature right now would prohibit discrimination against people with disabilities in the organ transplant process and assures access for qualified individuals who, with or without the support of the networks available to them, or auxiliary aids and services and or reasonable modifications to the policies or practices, and if they meet the essential eligibility requirements of receiving that organ. So that is correct. Next, who are you going to call? People keep driving too fast down my street, and I want someone to put up a stop sign. All right, Morgan, what do you think this time? How are you going to do that? Is that your city council member, your state House of Delegates and state senators, or your U.S. senators and U.S. Congress members?
That would be A, your city council members.
How about you, Melissa?
I say A, your city council members.
All right, you would be correct again. Your city council members. Your city council member for your district. They will contact, and not all cities have districts. Some have, all of them are called at-large that cover the whole city. But either way, they would contact the Public Works Department that handles the streets and sidewalks and things like that and signs, and the police department, and it would take a vote of council to approve putting up such a sign. All right, and then for our trick question of the month, when there's a storm with lots of rain, there are streets that flood because the storm sewers get overwhelmed with too much water, and that creates a hazard for cars and trucks. Who do you call to get this fixed? Is that your city council member, your state House of Delegates and state senators, or your U.S. senator and Congress members? What do you think, Melissa?
Your city council member.
How about you, Morgan?
I think it is also your city council member.
Well, to answer that question this time, we have Parkersburg City Council Member Wendy Tuck to provide that answer. What do you say, Wendy?
Has many layers. Your city council person would be a great person to start with. And I just learned recently that there's the water department that deals with leaks, and the stormwater drainage department that deals with stormwater runoff. So you're going to be dealing with stormwater, not the water department, not the public utility board. So that would be the first thing. But actually, if it's your street and it's city owned, it is going to be stormwater. If it's a street like Garfield Avenue, which happens to be Highway 14, or on Camden, that's 95, those are state routes. And so those are state roads, and the city really has nothing to do with repairing those or fixing those. It can be a bit of a frustration for people and for the city as well, because you've got a lot more people to coordinate with. I think the city can help facilitate changes by contacting your state legislators, our state legislators, and encouraging them to take action more quickly. But it is one of those things that you got to know who to call.
All right, so there you go. Thanks for playing this time, Melissa and Morgan. You did very well. That's a multifaceted question, though. So you do start with City Council, and of course you go to Go Vote WV, the Secretary of State's website, to make sure that you're registered to vote. So when the next election comes up, you know who to vote. You can vote for your city council member, state lawmaker, or federal lawmaker.
This is Morgan Spicer, and I am here today with District 4 Council Member Wendy Tuck. And today she's going to speak to us about what got her involved in running for City Council and what all she does at City Council. She previously joined us on our segment of Who You Gonna Call. So we're glad that she's able to join us to answer a few of these questions. Thank you so much, Wendy, for joining us.
Thank you, Morgan. Thank you very much. I guess you might know that I've lived in Parkersburg here since 1982. We moved here when my second son was born. We've always cared deeply about this neighborhood. I worked for a short time at Good Shepherd in a neighborhood ministry kind of position, and we started a program called Neighbor Helping Neighbor. And over the years, I continued to work in different fields with foster kids or senior citizens, or became a teacher, got my degree, my master's degree in teaching. And, we just kind of watched our neighborhood go down. Our property values were going down, crime was going up. And I found myself really wanting to do something. We had actually voted for the person who held my seat before, but I just felt like he wasn't really making the difference that I wanted to see. And that was pretty much that would have been in January, February. So I signed up to run, and then COVID hit. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, you can't go door to door. Oh, you can't go to fundraisers. Oh, you can't have soup bean dinners. So it became a very, very different kind of campaign. And one of the first things I did was I really wanted to make sure our neighbors were okay. And so I sent or delivered newsletters to every single person in our district. And it had a little survey. Are you over 60? Do you have chronic illness? Do you have little kids? And do you have transportation? And then the other side of that was, how can you help? And so we got a fair amount of responses to that. And we were able to kind of match people up. This was March and April. And then through the rest of the summer, it was, walking a lot. And whoever was out on the streets, we would just have conversations. And I got to know a lot of people that way. I got to know a lot of the issues that way. And just, again, I love this neighborhood. I mean, I just love it. And the more people I meet here, the more I'm just fascinated by it and just inspired and moved by people that live here. Mm-hmm. So in a way, it's going to be a great, thing to work with this neighborhood.
Yes, and I've lived in Parkersburg most of my life, and I really do love it here. It is a great little place to be. So, and that's important with what you did with building relationships and all the grassroots that you did around around Parkersburg. So that's amazing that you were able to get all of that done, especially with all these COVID-19 restrictions. So tell us about how that was working for you, like with the whole grassroots and stuff. Did you have like an action plan? How did you devise that?
Walk out the front door and see who I ran into. I'll give you one example though. One of the very first people I met were Jack and Teresa, and they were a little skeptical, about who I was, and but asked me some very direct questions about where I stand on things, and we came to a very respectful relationship. And just recently, this moved me a lot, is that their son is autistic and works at the SW workshop. And Teresa's nephew died recently, and they couldn't afford the funeral expenses. So between her family and me, we set up a GoFundMe and just asked neighbors to contribute. And then the son, out of his own volition, out of his own heart, also contributed to the funeral expenses. Wow. And I just thought that was gorgeous to me, you know, and then the fact that they had lived in this house for a long time, and the landlord died, and the son had it for a while, and then he just said, I'm just going to give you the house. And so that gave me a sense of, oh, that's another way people get home ownerships, is if there's a rental with a good relationship with the landlord. So then, that got me thinking about, how do people become to own their homes. And then I got involved with a person who owns a lot of rental property and a young man who was becoming a realtor. And so she was able to help him pass his realtor exam. And then in turn, he knew how to help her get her COVID shot. And so it's all these little, networks of people that are really helping each other out a lot. There was one other neighbor who had a lot of drug traffic next to her, and she was surveilling the property. And then the police were able to use her surveillance and were able to, to break up the drug ring. So again, there's a lot of people sharing security, a lot of people sharing information. A lot of people just want to look after each other. They're already doing that. And so I find my job is almost like a matchmaker, putting this person together with that person and saying, you guys have something in common, whether it's beads or neighborhood watch, or got a group of people sending out birthday cards now to people in the neighborhood, especially those who are older or, sick and things like that.
Oh, well, excellent. So, and that's what People First is all about. It's a very tight knit group of people that, they do look out for each other in their state and in their regions. So for our self-advocates, what would be some really good steps that they can use to further not only develop the communications within their state, their local chapters, but, maybe to go talk to their legislators? What would be some good tips?
Absolutely. I think that as people talk to each other, they find out that they have a lot in common, and then you can go 2 by 2. I always find that I think that having a partner or a buddy system is always a good way to go. And also you've probably identified the things that you have in common, and that as you talk more about it, your viewpoints get more consolidated, and that you can make better points that way. I think it's really good to make appointments and really know your point. What are you trying to make? And keep it as brief and to the point as possible and personal. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a firm believer of strength in numbers. You unite people together, and your goals become their goals, and you guys can fight together. I mean, no one should fight alone when it comes to the issues that you're passionate about.
Right. Right.
What about that cat behind you there? I see a cat there.
Yes, I have 2 cats. They're my daughters, but they keep me company. And a lot of times people think that city council is just Tuesday nights, twice a month. And I'm here to tell you, no, it's not, because you're always researching projects. You're looking for resources. You're looking for contact people. You're designing newsletters. There's so many things to do. Yeah. And it's really not just a meeting. You're kind of helping things happen. And it takes everything I've got. And then
wow. All right. Well, Wendy, that was some great stuff there you shared with us. And thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Legislative Matters Live with M&M.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are so fortunate to have Nicole Jorwic, Senior Director of Public Policy at the ARC, joining us this morning. We have a great show that Melissa and Morgan have put together, and we just want to dive right in, welcome you, and ask you why legislative advocacy is important.
Sure. Legislative advocacy is extremely important because it's very important that whether it's your state legislators or your federal legislators, that they have an understanding of the issues that are important to you and issues that impact your life. And the best way to do that is for them to hear that directly from you.
How long have you worked for the ARC?
I have been at the ARC, it will be 6 years in July, which is hard to believe. And I started as the Director of Rights Policy, and now I'm the Senior Director. And so really enjoyed my time and keep enjoying it, of course.
Okay. So Nicole, why is what the ARC does important to you?
Sure. Well, the mission of the ARC is to protect and promote the civil rights of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And the mission of the organization is definitely what drives my work and why I wanted to start working at the ARC. And that's important, not only because as a person, that's what I believe, but also I have a personal connection to disability. My brother, Chris, he is 31 and receives Medicaid home and community-based services in Illinois. Because of him, I've been lucky that disability has been part of the fabric of my life, and it just so happened to also influence my career. And so that is part of why the ARC is so important, and the mission of the organization that has been going on for over 70 plus years now at this point, that history, fighting for inclusion, fighting for participation in the community for all people with disabilities really drives me and is really important.
Wonderful.
Obviously, you've been involved in policy before you became the director. So now what do you do in your role at the senior director level at public policy for the ARC of the United States?
Sure. I still do a lot of our direct lobbying, which means working directly with the federal legislators. I cover some very specific areas. I cover access to Medicaid home and community-based services. So dealing with waiting list issues, dealing with just generally access issues, and also workforce. So making sure that we're getting enough funding and support for the direct support professional workforce. And as senior director, another part of my role is working more directly with our state chapters and making sure our state chapters have funding to support advocacy, and also that our federal advocacy and state advocacy work together really well and cohesively. And so that's been a newer part of my job that I really, really enjoy.
Very good. And what are some specific topic areas or issues that the ARC believes are important?
Sure. There's a lot of, obviously, every issue has a disability angle, because they say if you can make something work for a disability, you can make it work for anyone. But so there's a lot of different issue areas. So don't take this as an inclusive list, a full list, I should say. But our top priorities as we continue to recover from the pandemic is to continue to expand access to home and community-based services. We actually just last week had a really big bill come out that myself and other ARC staff have been working on for over a year and a half, that would make home and community-based services mandatory in the program. So that would eliminate waiting lists. It would mean that across state lines, the services would be the same no matter where you lived. It would make the whole system a lot simpler to navigate for individuals with disabilities and their families. And so that's going to be, it's going to take a long time because it's a big investment, but having that bill out there is a huge testament to all the advocacy that has been done in the last 4 years or so that people do understand why we need to deal with this issue. So addressing the waiting list issues, et cetera, through that bill is going to be a top priority. Workforce issues is another one. As we've seen the important work that direct support professionals are doing throughout the pandemic, we want to make sure that that workforce is better supported, are getting better wages, et cetera. We'll also be dealing with things like marriage penalties, income and asset limits, all the things that are really important. Doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to get there this Congress, but those are the things that we're going to be pushing for and working with legislators to continue to get bills out there until we can ultimately get them passed with our advocacy.
When the different lawmakers see, they're like, okay, here's the group, and obviously you have an important role being a lobbyist, but what tips do you have for our self-advocates who are not lobbyists but have those stories? What do you want them to do? What are some tips so that they can be most effective, whether they're writing on the We Act Wednesdays that the ARC sponsors, or they're just simply calling their local lawmaker? What tips do you have for advocates to be most effective when they're letting their voice heard?
Sure, that's a great question. I think that the most important thing is that don't be intimidated or worried about what you don't know. The only thing that you have to be an expert on when you're talking to a legislator is your own story. You don't have to know all the things that I've spent a lot of years learning. You don't have to know all the things that Doug and Liz know. You just have to know how these services impact your life. And that's all you have to explain. And so don't worry and don't be intimidated, because that's really frankly, that's the stuff that makes my job easier. When everybody else is going and telling those stories, I can come in later with the numbers and the data and everything else. But those personal stories are what moves people. We have seen that. We saw that in 2017. We saw that in the last year. So that's all you need to do. And also make sure that you're telling your stories and talking about these issues with more than just your legislators. It's really important that we make sure that we're expanding our voices outside of just the disability community. So whether it's your neighbor or your aunt or your uncle or your cousin, maybe tell them about the services that support you and how they get paid for, and why we need to continue investing in it, because it's going to need to take a lot more people to understand why we need to invest in these services in order to get our big things done. And so those would be probably my two things. You only have to be an expert on you, and make sure that you're educating legislators and other people as well in the general public.
Very good. And our last question, we had some wonderful questions that came up from Melissa and Morgan, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't forget anything. So what would you like to add?
Oh, we covered a lot, but I think the biggest thing that I would like to add is that I know that it can get a little bit frustrating when we're talking about the same issues. I know that I feel like I eat, sleep, and breathe home and community-based services some days, and we've been kind of knocking our head against the wall sometimes, but it's really important to not get frustrated and to not lose hope, because we really are in a place for a big shift in how we're providing services, and we just have to keep moving and keep pushing, and can't lose faith that we're going to get there. And so I know it can be disheartening sometimes, but just know that we really have had a lot of impact. The money that was just included, almost $13 billion, that something like that has never been done. And that was because of the voices of disability advocates. And so we can just keep building on there and don't lose hope.
Well, we thank you so much, Nicole. We've had the great pleasure of having a visit on Legislative Matters Live with M&M by Nicole Jorwic, Senior Director, Public Policy at the ARC. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, for our Advocacy in Action segment, we have got Vicki Wolfe, who lives in Parkersburg, and she's going to talk to us about how she's using her advocacy in action to impact her life. Welcome, Vicki, to Legislative Matters Live.
Thank you.
And you want to tell us about your wonderful story about your mortgage?
Yes, I have lived in the same house for 27 years. And I asked the landlord if I could buy the house, and he kept putting me off for 4 years. So after that, I asked him again, and I said, well, you have other properties. Why can't I have this house? Start buying this house. So 9 years and 5 months ago, I started buying it, and I'll have it paid off next month. And
That's wonderful, Vicki.
I will have the deed, and I would encourage anybody else that is disabled, if they want to own their own home, talk to the landlord that you want the house from, or go to a lawyer and have him draw papers for the house you want, and then go from there. And I've been paying all the taxes. I've been paying the insurance, and I have done without a lot of things that I need. Right now, my computer's 13 years old, but I wanted this house more important than I needed the computer.
Wow, it looks like you had a lot of sacrifices to get where you are now. So that is amazing that you are just about finished with this. How many more payments do you got left until you're finished?
Next month is my last payment. Then I have to go to the lawyer and get some things squared away. And then I'll go to the court, take the papers down to the courthouse, pay $11, and they will send me my deed. Then I can have me a burning party out back. But the thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to burn the original deed. I am going to make a copy of it, burn the copy, and put the original deed in a frame on my wall. Because I want to know that this house is mine.
Yeah.
Yep. So Vicki, tell us how owning your own house and paying off your mortgage will help you in the long run to better your life.
Well, it will help me because I can tell other people that are disabled that want to own their own home how to go about doing that. And that you have to make sacrifices if you want this home. You just can't go out and buy what you want. You have insurance, you have your house payments, you have your insurance you have to have. So if someone falls on your property, you're protected. And it's just, it's overwhelming because this is going to be my first house. And I'll be 66 this year.
Mm-hmm.
And this will be my first house. Usually people own their house by the time they're 40 or 30.
Yeah.
But it took me this long, being disabled, it took me this long to get my house paid off. But it's finally going to be paid off, and I'm going to have me a big party out back and invite my friends.
There you go.
That's great, Vicki. So with the money, the extra money that you're going to have left after you make your last payment next month, what will you be able to do with that extra money? How will that help you?
I'm going to take that extra money and I'm going to do some repairs on the house.
That's great.
That need to be done. See, it's not over yet. It's not over yet because there needs to be some repairs done. I need a new furnace. I need a new roof. There's things when you own a house that you have to save your money for. You just can't go out here and blow it. You have to take that money and save it back for what you need for your home.
That's very important. I mean, and the important lesson of money saving, that is very important.
Yes.
And so you said you're going to put that deed up on your wall. So that's going to be almost like a victory for you, that you conquered, that you took the steps you needed, and you made what you've been fighting for all your life yours. You know, like you said, this was going to be your first house. So this is a definite victory for you, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I'm going to make a copy of the deed. And I'm going to take one Saturday when it's real pretty. And I'm going to invite some of my friends over. And I've already got the metal can. And we're going to have a great big burning party.
Big old housewarming party. That sounds like a good time. Can't wait to see that. And I bet that party is going to be a lot of fun. So now that we know about how you fought to get make this home yours, what are some steps that you can educate other self-advocates around the West Virginia area on this issue that you had?
Well, with my disability, it didn't stop me. My disability did not stop me from owning my own home.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to want something bad enough to take the steps to owning your own home. And you have to make a lot of sacrifices. You have to do without a lot of things you want. Not need, but want. So, people out there, if you want to own your own home, you have to make a lot of sacrifices.
So when, like, some of the things that you would want, that's a good thing as well, that you said that there's a good difference between what you need and what you want. There's two completely different things there, because I could definitely use a lot of good things right now, but it's very important to save money. Is it, Vicki?
Yes, it is, because you don't know when your furnace is going to break down. You're going to need a new roof. Your plumbing is, you have to get a plumber in here. Like the other day, I had to get a man in here for the furnace because the furnace was acting up and it was cold still. I had to have money saved back for that. Thank God I had it in the bank.
Right. That's great, Vicki. Are there any custom things about your house to accommodate your wheelchair?
Yes, my property goes from Stadium Drive to 24th Street, and at the front of my house, there's 14 steps. But at the back of my house, I have a great big backyard, and there is a deck, a ramp, and a sidewalk out in the yard to go to the main sidewalk. So that's another thing. I'm going to have to save money for repairs on it because it is 4 years old and it's going to need new boards.
Right.
Yeah.
That's another repair that I've got to think of. See, you have to put your priorities straight. Right now, my priority is, after I get the house paid off, is get my ramp and my sidewalk so that I can get out and in of my house.
Great.
And that's my first priority.
So how do you use your skills to live independently, like getting around town, like with your wheelchair and public transportation? How do you go about doing that?
Well, I either ride the public bus system or I get the Wood County Senior Citizens to take me. Just like I have 2 appointments next week, one therapy and one doctor. And if I didn't have senior citizens taking me, I couldn't get to Belfry to do either one of them. So I use my resources, and other people call me for People First and say, Vicki, how can I do this? And I tell them, I advise them on, and I give them phone numbers, and I advise them on how they can get somewhere where the city buses does not run.
Right.
Okay, well, thanks, Vicki, for joining us for this session of Advocacy in Action. Me and Melissa really appreciate you showing up and talking to us. And it's a definite congratulations for you.
Thank
We
you.
finally get that all paid off, and you can definitely say it's mine and it's all paid off. So
Yes.
Thanks again.
Thanks again, Vicki, for being here with us.
You're welcome.
And we will talk to you again sometime in the future. So you have a good one.
You too. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Vicki. Bye.
Well, Morgan, we've made it through another show, and I know I learned a lot.
Me too, Melissa. And we certainly appreciate all of our guests this month. We'd like to thank Wendy Tuck, 4th District Council Member for the City of Parkersburg, and West Virginia House of Delegates Member Vernon Criss.
Nicole Jorwic, Senior Director of Public Policy at the ARC of the United States, and our Advocate in Action, Vicki Wolfe.
Yes, indeed. And if you know of someone we should have as a guest on the show, or a topic you would like us to talk about, let Melissa or myself know.
And don't forget to go to the People First webpage and click on the Contact Lawmakers tab at the top for information on how to contact our state lawmakers and our members of Congress. And thank you, Morgan, for another great show.
And thank you, Melissa. I had a great time. This is a lot of fun, and I can't wait until next month. But until next month, just remember, advocacy matters.
And so do you.
All right. See you next time.
Bye.